Former DUP leader Sir Jeffrey Donaldson has been found guilty of 18 historical sex offences against 2 women when they were children. This was the scene earlier as he left Newry Crown Court in a prison van. The judge had warned him he would face a lengthy sentence. A very good evening, I'm Niall Donnelly. Welcome to this special edition of Up Close. Just after 2 p.m. this afternoon, a jury at Newry Crown Court convicted former MP Sir Jeffrey Donaldson of 1 count of rape, 13 counts of indecent assault and 4 counts of gross indecency against 2 women when they were children. His wife Eleanor Donaldson was found to have committed the acts relating to offences of aiding and abetting following a trial of the facts. Mr Donaldson, who's 63, had pleaded not guilty to the offences, which spanned a period between 1985 and 2008. The women, identified in court as complainants A and B, both gave evidence at the trial. Well, with me now in the studio are the crime correspondent of the Belfast Telegraph, Alison Morris, and the child safeguarding expert, Marcella Leonard. And just to advise you that you may find some of the details we're discussing in this programme this evening distressing. Good evening to you, Alison and Marcella. To start with yourself, Alison, at this trial throughout, when that verdict came today, describe that for us.
Well, it was a strange moment. As you know, this was day 3 of the jury's deliberation. They started on Thursday afternoon, over 10 hours of deliberation. They came in just shortly before lunch to ask for some clarification on points of law, and at that point they were asking about Eleanor Donaldson, so it became sort of obvious that maybe they'd reached a verdict on Jeffrey Donaldson. Just after lunch we filed back into the court, and that was when I suppose, I've covered courts for 20 odd years, it was extraordinary. The foreman of the jury stood on his feet. Jeffrey Donaldson was told to stand on his feet as well. The court clerk then asked the foreman, had they reached a verdict on count 1? And he said yes, and said, what is that verdict? And he said guilty. And that was repeated 18 times. Guilty, 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 guilty. He then moved on to Eleanor Donaldson. Because she faced a trial of facts, she wasn't found guilty, she was found responsible, and he answered yes to all 5 of those charges. The judge then told Jeffrey Donaldson he would be placed on the sex offenders register, that he could expect a considerable prison sentence, and he remanded him into custody, telling the court custody officer to take him down.
How did he react during all of this?
He stood with his hands folded in front of him and did not react really at all. When the judge told him that he would be going to prison, he nodded his head at the judge, but apart from that there was no emotion at all, and that was pretty much how he had behaved throughout this trial. Sometimes he sat scribbling notes in a notebook, sometimes he had maybe shook his head, but other times he sat with his arms crossed and didn't really show any emotion.
Marcella, good evening to yourself. Many of the headlines, of course, will be around Sir Jeffrey Donaldson, but behind all of this are 2 women, 2 victims, abused when they were children.
And I think that's what we need to remember is what an incredible experience for them to have to been put through, firstly, a full trial by Jeffrey Donaldson, and that they had to go through the whole experience of having to explain to not only to a jury but really to everybody, you know, listening to the court case. And thankfully today they have been believed, and I think, you know, we should all be thinking about the impact for them, because this is for them is probably the start of them trying to now reach a stage where they can start to recover, because up until now they've had to, you know, very difficult, I would imagine, particularly, you know, when you're sitting in court listening to how victims have to be cross-examined on what they've said and what they've experienced. So we have to now think today of those victims. It
must have taken some courage to take this case against a man of such great reputation.
And I think that's what we need to remember, is that for the 2 victims to firstly think, have they got the strength to take, you know, on somebody with such a high profile? You have to think about the impact of that, and they must have had such an amount of turmoil to decide, will they go through it, will people believe them, will they take them through it, and to have to go through, you know, it's also the media and everybody and the interest that this is showing, have they had the strength to do that? And I think what we have to now recognise, the message that gives now to other people to be able to come forward, and what does that mean for them? But that took a strength of courage we have to all acknowledge.
Alison, back to yourself. Many moments in this trial over the weeks. For you, though, what were the key standout moments?
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's important to say we're sitting here now and we can say victims, because as we know, this trial was so heavily scrutinised by the Attorney General, and so we were referring to these women as complainant A and complainant B. There was a day that we heard they're achieving best evidence, which again was extraordinary because we hadn't really heard the details of the allegations about Jeffrey Donaldson until then. There was the day that Jeffrey Donaldson himself took the stand to give evidence on his own behalf and then was cross-examined for 2 days by the prosecution, by Rosemary Walsh KC, who walked him through those allegations and tore his defence apart, I think, you know, with great skill. But to see someone, a man who the journalist sitting in that press box, closer than where I am from you now, people who we knew Jeffrey Donaldson, we had interviewed Jeffrey Donaldson. Right before this happened, Jeffrey Donaldson was at the height of his political power, and here he was sitting answering questions about horrendous sexual abuse against 2 children.
Incredible scenes, I'm sure. We'll talk some more later in the programme. Well, despite being best known as a politician, today's verdict shows that there was a secret, more sinister side to Sir Jeffrey Donaldson. Paul Riley looks now at the convicted sex offender whose public persona was at odds with the man behind closed doors.
From this Knight of the Realm, invested by Prince William inside the splendour of Buckingham Palace, to tonight facing a stark prison cell held at the pleasure of His Majesty the King, the fall from grace is spectacular. Sir Jeffrey Donaldson will from now be known simply by his prison number. What this trial has shown more than anything is that there were, as one witness in the trial said, 2 Jeffrey Donaldsons. The pious, devout Christian who for more than 20 years wore a fish badge on his lapel. He built an image as the prayerful politician. His official authorised biography is laced with references to an MP devoted to God. But the truth could not have been more different. The evidence given to his trial revealed a philandering politician having affairs at the same time as he was leading prayers. His wife Eleanor Donaldson was so convinced he had betrayed her again, she bugged his car. In the witness box, Donaldson admitted to having one affair with the divorcee in London in 2008. At the time, he was an MP, MLA, junior minister at Stormont and a councillor. He had also just been sworn in as a Privy Councillor, entitling him to be styled as the Right Honourable. This trial has exposed the real Jeffrey Donaldson as a paedophile who had secretly abused young girls. In court, he was accused of telling sinful and deceitful lies. Reference was made to a letter written to one of his victims. In it, he used the phrase, "lift a sinner out of the deep pit of sin," going on to talk about his sinful and selfish actions. Despite Donaldson's denials, the jury had the final say.
Paul Riley reporting there on what really is a spectacular fall from grace, Alison, for Sir Jeffrey Donaldson. What's the message, would you say, to women in particular maybe tonight and other victims across the country?
There was lots of references made to Jeffrey Donaldson's status throughout this. The judge had to say to the jury, I'm not going to insult your intelligence. I know you all know who this man is. The prosecution said these women had to come forward knowing that this wouldn't remain between those 4 walls because of the interest in this case, because of who he is. But listen, what the last 4 weeks has shown is the law is a great leveller. He stood in there, the evidence was presented, he had a really robust defence, as he was entitled to. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether he's Jeffrey Donaldson MP or whether he's a bin man or some guy who works in Asda. The law treats everybody equally, and the law in this case treated him as he should have been. He was found guilty, and I hope for other people watching that who are maybe in despair and think that maybe they shouldn't come forward or they're afraid to come forward, it shows that the law will treat everyone equally, and if the evidence is there to prosecute someone, they will be prosecuted. And it was torturous as a journalist waiting all weekend to come back on Monday, so I can only imagine what it was like for those 2 women, and I really hope that they feel vindicated now. I know that people believe them.
Indeed. And yourself, Marsala, what's your message to victims this evening?
I think the key message that these 2 very brave victims have brought forward is no matter how long ago it happened, because I think there's also we need to remember as well is that they have held this pain and hurt for such a long time before they have felt that they had the strength to be able to come forward. And I think therefore people need to know it doesn't matter how long ago it was. If you feel now today that you can come forward, you need to understand that it doesn't matter how long ago. It doesn't matter who that person is. It doesn't matter the elevated status that they might have, is that, or indeed how everybody else puts that person on a pedestal. if you've been harmed by an individual and they have hurt you in that way, please come forward.
Marcella Leonard and Alison Morris, thank you both for joining us on Up Close this evening. Now, still to come, I'll be joined by the Belfast Telegraph political editor Suzanne Breen and the commentator Alex Kane. And our reporter Sarah Clark will be looking back on Sir Jeffrey Donaldson's career. Please do stay with us. Welcome back to this up-close special on the Jeffrey Donaldson verdict. Shortly, I'll be joined by Suzanne Breen, the political editor of the Belfast Telegraph, and the commentator Alex Kane. Before that, Sarah Clark looks back on the rise and fall of Sir Jeffrey Donaldson.
Jeffrey Donaldson portrayed himself as a committed unionist, a hard-working politician and a family man. When he won the nomination to stand as MP for Lagan Valley, replacing veteran Ulster Unionist leader James Molyneux, the first person he paid tribute to was his wife Eleanor.
Friends, I couldn't have done what I have done all these years. And I couldn't go out and fight for our cause without the support that Eleanor has given to me down through the years of our marriage.
At 20, he oversaw the Westminster election campaigns for veteran MP Enoch Powell in South Down. 2 years later, he became the youngest person to win a Stormont seat in South Down. He worked as assistant to the Ulster Unionist leader James Molyneux and then stepped into his shoes as MP for Lagan Valley in 1997. He was part of the talks team in the negotiations which led to the signing of the Good Friday Agreement. But just as the deal was nearing completion, an angry Donaldson staged a dramatic walkout from the talks at Castle Buildings. Although he remained in the party, he was a constant thorn in the side of the then leader David Trimble. Eventually in 2003, he quit the party alongside fellow dissident Ulster Unionists Arlene Foster and Nora Beer. It came as no surprise when just a month later he announced he was joining the DUP.
Today we are announcing our decision to join the Ulster Democratic Unionist Party, to become members of that party, to participate in the negotiations with them, to work for the change that the people of Northern Ireland have voted for.
Again, he quickly rose through the ranks. He was part of the St Andrews Agreement negotiations and sat behind Ian Paisley in Stormont in March 2007 when the DUP leader and the Sinn Féin president Gerry Adams announced they had reached an accord to share power. But 2 years later, he was caught up in the Westminster expenses scandal. He later apologised for claiming back the cost of hotel pay-per-view films on his parliamentary expenses, repaying more than £550 to the Commons Fees Office. In 2017, he played a pivotal role negotiating the Confidence and Supply Agreement, which propped up Theresa May's minority Conservative government. But the relationship eventually soured, and when Boris Johnson won a snap general election in December 2019, the DUP's leverage evaporated. To Unionist fury, the eventual Brexit deal with the EU resulted in the protocol, which left Northern Ireland being treated differently to the rest of the UK. 2 years later, Donaldson was again at the centre of the action when the DUP suffered very public leadership convulsions. After Arlene Foster was ousted as leader, Donaldson put his name forward to succeed her, but it was Edwin Poots who took the top job.
What a lovely day.
But after an internal party revolt a month later, Mr Poots resigned and Sir Jeffrey finally took over as leader. His first order of business was trying to find a way to resolve the post-Brexit trading arrangements, which had by that stage led to the collapse of the Stormont institutions. Intense negotiations resulted in the Safeguarding the Union Agreement, which Jeffrey Donaldson claimed had removed the Irish sea border, although critics, including some within his own party, insisted it didn't. Donaldson led the charge in support of the deal.
Today, because of the stirring up that is going on, I was threatened.
Days later, at a late-night DUP party conference, the DUP agreed to back the deal.
I believe that with the faithful delivery of this package of measures, hard work and dedication, we will be able to look back on this moment as the defining time when Northern Ireland's place within the Union was safeguarded and our place within the United Kingdom internal market was restored.
Within days, Stormont returned. It was yet another success for the Unionist dealmaker-in-chief. Stormont back, he was the toast of Washington during the annual St Patrick's Day celebrations. But within a month, one of the biggest political bombshells in Northern Ireland's history dropped. A political career spanning 40 years came crashing down in one shocking instant.
Sir Clark reporting. With me now in the studio, Suzanne Breen and Alex Kane. Suzanne, a couple of hours out from this verdict, a few hours, what do you make of it?
Well, I've been a journalist for 35 years and I have known Jeffrey Donaldson for that entire time. Never ever did I think that it would end like this for him. I knew him in his days in the Ulster Unionists, then leading the fight against David Trimble over the Good Friday Agreement when he jumped to the DUP. You know, sometimes I would have talked to him every day. He was always, as a journalist, very approachable, very open to the media. And I remember just a few weeks before he was charged, he was at the height of his powers. He was in the throne room in Hillsborough Castle with Chris Heaton Harris, and he had found his mojo. He was selling this deal very strongly, and even though he'd been in politics for 4 decades, you felt like the best politically was still to come for him.
Did you think he had any inkling of what was coming down the line?
Obviously, there was rumblings in the background, but I don't think he expected to be arrested in the manner in which he was. And talking to a lot of DUP politicians, they say that they are just stunned that he was running around trying to put out fires, sending messages, having meetings over the years, and yet he continued to function so smoothly as a politician.
Alex, this was a man you thought you knew well.
Well, I did think I knew him well. I met him first in 1985 when he won the by-election to the Northern Ireland Assembly. He's 22 years old. Next thing you know, he's in Jim Molyneux's seat as an MP. Then he carried through, senior figure in the Ulster Unionist Party. At every major negotiation, he was there, every function. Loved by the party. I mean, they adored him, Jeffrey Donaldson. And he was, even back then, he was just Jeffrey. You said, somebody needs to talk to Jeff. Everyone knew who you meant. Then to the DUP. Suddenly there, all the influence he carried with him, that whatever it's charisma, whatever it is now, people thought there was something about this guy. That's how he got his influence. He was affable, as Suzanne says. He was likeable. The Jeffrey Donaldson we saw was, maybe it was an image, maybe obviously contrived, but it was a very convincing performance because we all thought the same thing about this guy.
Just over 2 years ago, I saw him at Stormont and he was there. He was like a king or a master of everything he surveyed. Stormont was back up. He was beaming from ear to ear.
Well, that's because he wanted to save devolution. But people forget this about Jeffrey Donaldson. They think that the jump to the DUP was anti-agreement. He was never anti-agreement. He was never anti-devolution. He wanted Stormont to work. And at that key period, when people say what happened to him just as he began this selling, it was because they had a clear choice at that point. The whole thing was going to collapse and the DUP would have nowhere to go, or somehow he had to get the DUP to back the deal and get into the Assembly. And that's what mattered to him. He saved, at that moment, he saved devolution.
A very clear statement this evening earlier today from the current leader of the DUP, Gavin Robinson. What do you think the faithful DUP voter will make of what's happened here, Suzanne?
I think they, as the party's representatives will be absolutely aghast. Talking to DUP members and representatives, they feel betrayed. One said to me, look, you know, maybe everybody has skeletons in their cupboard, but we never suspected anything like this. This is not like staggering out of a pub with a few drinks too many. One thing that did come up in talking to a lot of people was that they felt that in some ways they never really knew Jeffrey. He wouldn't talk about his personal life. If people said, you know, what they did with their wives at the weekend, they had a nice meal or things like that, Jeffrey was happy talking about politics, but when the conversation veered into that more private area, he really shut it down. He didn't volunteer much information.
It strikes me that he was someone who could very easily, in the end, it now appears, Alex, compartmentalise all the different areas of his life.
Well, that's clearly what he did too. And I think, as I said, whether it was an image or not, that affability was important to his political career. But I think it's worth saying that while we are saying how shocked we were, and this, we didn't see this coming, there are hundreds of people now, maybe thousands of people watching this programme right now who I hope will realise that no matter who the person is, if they're carrying baggage, if they're carrying grief, if something happened to them, go forward, report it. Because what this has shown more than anything else, it doesn't matter a damn who you are in politics. It doesn't matter anything about your societal position or your titles. If a jury gets to hear you, they will listen to you.
Between you two, you've followed politics for decades. How shocked were you, and how shocked have you been, and how shocked will you continue to be by all of this?
Well, look, I think everybody remembers the moment when they first heard that Jeffrey Donaldson was facing these charges, and everybody will remember where they were when that jury verdict came in. We looked at the faces of the DUP people today at the press conference, and you could just see they are still reeling from this, and this will be hard to get over, even though they've handled it in a textbook manner. The fact was that the party was branded around him, and that is potentially a bit of a problem moving forward.
In terms of politics, plenty said on that front, but we have to go back, you know, behind this, two very strong women, two victims who hopefully now can begin somehow to rebuild their lives, Alex.
It will be extraordinarily difficult because they have the lifelong anonymity unless they come out and decide to tell their story. But I said that the big thing, I'll say it again now because I think it's worth saying, for those people who have watched this, we watch it as journalists and commentators, other people watch it out of lurid interest, but there are a lot of people watching this thinking, that's me, that's my story, that's my life. And for all the things we say, oh, we didn't expect this, we didn't know this, and how we were misled, and how shocked we were and so on, the reality is we're not hurting right now. We're not wondering where our next step is. So to the two women, who, as they are now, they have demonstrated enormous courage. And all the way through that crisis and court case, not a word from him.
A few closing thoughts from yourself this evening. We've about 20 to 30 seconds left, Suzanne.
They are courage personified, and they are vindicated by this jury verdict. It was a unanimous verdict, and it was guilty on all counts. So those women have been very, very brave, and they did the right thing.
And in a sentence, looking to the future, Alex, for them?
I think it depends what they choose to do now, because a lot of people will be saying, tell us the full story, tell us more, you know, identify yourself, because sometimes identifying helps other people.
Alex Kane and Suzanne Breen, thank you for joining us on Up Close tonight. So this evening, as Jeffrey Donaldson prepares to spend his first night behind bars, he does so in the knowledge that the judge has warned him to expect a lengthy sentence. Now, if you or someone you know have been affected by any of the issues raised in tonight's programme, search UTV News for support information. There's also extensive coverage on the UTV website. For now though, from me and all the team here at UTV, thank you for watching and a very good evening.